Hi, welcome to the video on the genitive case. So far you've probably just learned the nominative and accusative case, which are considered kernel elements of the sentence, which have to do with the subject and the direct object. In other words, you kind of need them in order for the sentence to be complete. The genitive case is going to be your first case where it's not actually required for a sentence. It's just gravy, and we call that a modifier. So keep that word in mind as you go through this video. There are two different kinds of modifiers in Latin and in English, I guess, where there are adjectival modifiers and there are adverbial modifiers. Let's write those over here. Alright, so the genitive case is going to be a lot like an adjective in that it's going to modify another noun, so that for genitives are going to be adjectival modifiers. If we look at this example over here, it'll kind of sum up what I'm talking about. We see this cat, this is my cat, but he is gray, and you know English well enough to know that's an adjective modifying cat. That's all good, but in Latin, gray is not going to be in the genitive case. This of Mr. Haydn is going to be the genitive case in Latin because it's showing possession. You can see the possessor, the of Mr. Haydn part, that's describing whose cat this is. So it's a characteristic of the cat. And therefore it is adjectival because it is modifying a noun, just like an adjective would. Move on to the next slide for more details. And as you know, the genitive forms are going to vary based on declension, first through third. And since you already know your endings, we're just going to do a quick review here of the various endings in each declension. And note we're just doing the genitive forms. So in first declension, the genitive is going to be an AE ending. The plural is an ARUM ending. In the second declension, you're going to see an I ending in the singular. Remember, it's not to be confused with the nominative plural. Over here we have aurum, O-R-U-M. So it looks a lot like that A-R-U-M except with an O. And the third declension, we're going to have an IS ending in the singular. And in the plural, we're just going to have a UM ending, which is why we have to know a noun is third declension, or else we're going to think it's in the second declension, it's going to be accusative or something. So be careful with that, and make sure you know the declension of your nouns. With that in mind, there's an example at the bottom here. We have tempus temporis. And you know from the dictionary entry, that IS ending, that you're in the third declension, because the genitive is IS, and this is the genitive form. So that means we know we're in third declension, and we find our root by taking that ending right there off of the root, and we get temporis, first of all because it's given, but second of all because we add the IS to the root, and then in the plural we get temporum, which actually looks like this aurum ending up here, but note that the OR is actually in your root. The UM ending is actually what's being added on there. Okay? So there's your root there, here's your IS ending, and that's how you do that. Okay? Moving on. Alright, so now it's time to do a little practice, but first we have to kind of know the concepts behind the genitive case. There's a practice at the bottom of the slide though, so we can get to that pretty soon. The genitive is almost always able to be translated with the preposition of in English. And you'll note at the very first slide it said the cat of Mr. Haydn. The of here is actually going to be very neat because even if it doesn't do what it normally does, often you can translate it with of. So it'll make more sense, I guess, as you expand your knowledge of the genitive case. But you're going to translate of something as your genitive translation. So remember, like in the first slide, you had the cat of Mr. Haydn. If I have the, let's see, the heel of Achilles. Achilles is owning the heel, right? So of Achilles would be in the genitive. And note that the word of is not going to appear in the Latin, and we'll see that in a second in our translation here, but just keep that in mind. The most common use of the genitive is to show possession. You've seen examples like this in the first slide. If you think of the heel of Achilles, it's his heel, so that makes sense there. For this reason, it modifies another noun and is thus, like I said in the first slide, adjectival. Cool. All right, let's take a look at the sentence. We have Leonem filius feminae videt. Now, if we're going through this one, we say, okay, this is accusative. That's going to be the do. We see filius, that's nominative, and it's the subject. Feminae, then, if filius is the subject, can't be nominative plural. And we don't know datives yet, so that means that this AE ending is probably genitive. When you know datives, we'll go into how you tell between genitive and dative when that happens. But since we know our endings, we know AE is the genitive singular nominative plural. We already have a nominative, so this one's got to be genitive. And then, of course, we have videt, which confirms what we thought because it's a singular verb. And this filius is singular, therefore we're good. If feminae were the nominative, videt would be vident with an NT. So, anyway, we see the genitive here. Now, what I like to do is draw an arrow from the genitive to the noun it modifies. You'll note it won't always modify a nominative. It can modify leonem if in different circumstances. However, we don't have those circumstances. And I'll tell you a rule about that when we're done here. But if we translate our sentence here, we can just say the son. And this is where we throw in that genitive because it modifies filius. The son of the woman sees the lion. All right. You'll note the word of, like I said up there, is not actually in the Latin. There's no preposition of in Latin. This is something you have to assume in English. And this is just because English and Latin are very different languages. And in English, we use of to show possession a lot of times. And in Latin, all they do is throw it in the genitive case. This is just a difference of language. So you're still showing possession across language. We just do it in different ways. So don't worry about that of not being in the Latin. If it's in the genitive case, you can throw the of in the English. It's not a worry. Let's move on. All right, so before we do this particular problem, on the last slide I told you that I would tell you a rule about how you know which noun the genitive modifies. And it's actually pretty easy. The genitive modifies the closest logical noun. What does that mean? Well, yes, it means proximity. That means we actually have to read Latin linearly. We have to do it not just jumping around the sentence. We have to read it linearly like I've emphasized to you. So that means we have to know what the closest noun is. Okay, we can do that. That's pretty easy. But then the logical part, that one's going to be a little tricky. So I guess you have to kind of test it out with two different nouns if they're equidistant, if they're the same distance from our genitive. And we're going to see an example of that in this example. So that's actually where we're going to go on right now to this bottom part here. Just like in the last one, we have to label everything first. So here we have an accusative, and it's the do. We see amici. Amici could be nominative or genitive. We don't know yet. But then when we see Marcus, we see, oh, that's nominative. Okay, and only nominative, so that means that this one cannot be nominative, has to be genitive. And then we see in venit, okay, that's a verb. At means and then capit, again, another verb. So this at connects two verbs. Boom and boom. All right. So we have this genitive. It's sandwiched between the canem and the Marcus. Those are both nouns. And they're both one word away. So the closest part doesn't really help us. Now we have to use the logical part of it. So we have to kind of just know what these things mean. Kana means dog. Marcus is a person's name. We can say the dog of the friend. That seems to make sense. Then we say Marcus of the friend. That doesn't seem to make sense because Marcus probably doesn't belong to his friend. And even if he did, that's kind of an awkward sentence. Why would you say the Marcus of the friend? Doesn't really make sense. So we're going to say the dog of the friend or of his friend. Okay, because it makes more sense that you would own a dog. That's where the logical part comes in. But anyway, we can translate pretty easily now. So we have Marcus. Oh, sorry, that's pretty sloppy. Let me rewrite that. Marcus finds and captures the dog of his friend. Period. Now, you might be saying, well, the dog of his friend sounds tedious. Why can't I just say his friend's dog? You can. There's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to show you of because after you get out of possession with the genitive case, of is still going to work, but the apostrophe s won't. But if you notice it is possessive, if you know for sure it's a possession thing, you can go ahead and say his friend's dog. That's another way to translate this. They're both right. Okay. So that's it. That's the example, and let's wrap this thing up. So yeah, I think you'll come to find to see the genitives are not that hard if you translate with of, and I think you'll get rather used to doing them like that. And they're really just that easy. As long as you know that rule that it goes with the closest logical noun, and that you're translated with of, and that they're adjectival. That's really all you need to know. If you put those things together, the genitive should not be all that confusing. So make sure to rewind the video if you didn't understand something, and re-listen, re-watch. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening.